In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to escape seemingly lost positions. A lot of times when we play chess, especially when we go up the rating ladder, our opponents are going to give us really tough problems. And if we can't defend things directly, we have to look for creative ways to defend them, i.e. counterattacks. Okay, in this position, we have the first true problem of the game, I think, in my opinion. White played bishop c1. Now, we have a pretty annoying threat here of bishop f4, attacking my queen. I can't really block it, so if I just make a random move here, I don't want to let bishop f4 come into the game. I don't want my opponent to bring his pieces into the game and attack my queen. My queen might have to move into passivity, and my opponent could just start developing, maybe attacking, just putting pressure on me, or something like that. And that's not really ideal. I could lose a game pretty quickly like that. So first of all, we have to realize that. So what I did here was I took my knight that was passive and put it in the g6 before anything. So I went knight g6. Now that was something I had to see. So I figured I'd mention it, but that wasn't a serious problem. That wasn't a hard problem to figure out. Okay, so my opponent came to g5 here. I just simply develop, and after a series of trades here, we have the first significant problem, I think, that was actually tough to solve in this game. You'll see there's a bind here on d6, and if a piece was there, especially a knight, that would be pretty much trouble for me if this bishop wasn't here, because this dark square bishop guards that bind. So my opponent played bishop takes e7, so he got rid of the dark square bishop, and then followed it up with knight e4. Now, that's a really great idea because my opponent's threatening to come in here, and it's impossible to get rid of that knight. If I let that knight come in here, white is actually almost winning in this position. And the evaluation keeps on climbing the more you let the engine run here. And that's because this knight is an absolute monster in chess. Okay, this knight here on d6 with these two pawns here, absolute beast. It's going to be incredibly hard to play this game, and I'm probably going to lose the game. So I had to figure out a way to stop the knight from coming to d6. Now, I can't directly do it. I can't directly guard this square. There's nothing I can do to guard this square. The knight just simply comes in here. There's two pawns guarding the knight. So I had to figure out a creative way to stop the knight from coming there. So if I can't directly guard the square, I have to figure out a way to stop the knight from moving. So try to figure out what I played here. Okay, I played bishop f5, pinning the knight to the queen. And basically what that does is the knight cannot move or he'll lose his queen, so he cannot play knight d6. So therefore my opponent just played f4. I took the knight. I played g6 because my opponent was threatening the h7 pawn. So I played g6. I also want to play against the light square bishop. So I put my pawns on light squares. And now we go to the another part of the game where my opponent played queen b3. This is another significant problem in the game, because I have an isolated pawn, and now my opponent's threatening to win a pawn. He's attacking the b7 pawn and the d5 pawn twice. And when these pawns go and we get to simplification, it just looks like white is up a pawn and has a better position and an easily winning game. So I can't defend both pawns at once. If I defend this pawn, I'm going to lose this pawn. If I defend this pawn, I'm going to lose this pawn. So here I knew I couldn't directly defend a pawn, so I had to find a creative way to get out of this. Now, we always want to evaluate the king position in chess. We always want to take that into account. So here I played b6. Now, the point of b6 is after white seemingly wins a pawn here, I just take the pawn on c5. And if white takes here, I would simply play queen b6, pinning the rook to the king, and I'm absolutely winning the game here because I have this rook pinned. And if white tries to hold on to it, I would simply trade. If white tries this, I trade first, and then I simply come here, and there's no way to save material. So for that reason, in this position, after we have queen takes d5, and I play pawn c5, we saw we cannot have rook take c5, so my opponent just simply took my queen, and I took, and now everything is defended, and I didn't lose any material. Now you'll notice my opponent sinks his rook into e7. Here's another situation. Now I can't guard the pawn with this rook because I'll lose this pawn. So I simply guard it with this rook. I'm guarding this pawn and attacking this pawn. Now this comes to the last problem my opponent gave me in this game that was very difficult. So my opponent looks like he's surrounding this pawn and he's going to win it. For example, he could just surround it with the 2 rooks and come in here with the king and now have 3 pieces on this pawn. I can only guard this pawn with 2 pieces. So it looks like, again, I'm going to lose a pawn and lose the game probably because I'm just down a pawn in a pretty much very balanced game, right? But here I just played it, so I just kind of gave up it's a spoiler alert there, but I played rook takes a2. I knew I couldn't salvage this pawn anymore. I couldn't just sit around there and make pretend and just try to hold on to the pawn because white would simply just come here and just bring his king around, something like that. It would be very difficult to hold on to that pawn. So I calculated and I looked for a counterattack to I couldn't directly defend it, so I just looked for a counterattack and found something in the position. So we always look for forcing moves. That's how I found it. I was looking for forcing moves. My opponent takes back, and the idea is you can't stop me from queening unless you give back the rook. If you come back here, I'll take your rook. If you come here, I'll just take you. So he had to take the pawn back. And now, again, material is even, and I solved all the problems. And this is a drawn position. However, my opponent lost the game here because he incorrectly went into a king and pawn endgame with me, which I happily obliged. The reason why it's losing is because we both have the same amount of pawns, but I have the outside passer. So I simply just bring my king in, and basically in this position, these 3 pawns can hold these 4 pawns. However, there's a fast break with my pawn and my king. So this king has to guard 2 things, my king and my pawn. It can't guard both. Normally, a player of this strength would not let my king come in here. However, he had to because he has to keep an eye on this pawn. But then when he keeps an eye on this pawn, these pawns fall. And after a couple of moves, my opponent resigned. So there you have it, folks. If you're ever in a sticky situation in chess and you feel like you can't defend anymore, always look for creative ways out, i.e. counterattacks in the position, and always take your opponent's king position into account when evaluating your position. Anyway, that's it. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you like these videos. I'll catch you next time. Go play some chess.